It started like any other morning. Same table by the window, same coffee, black, no sugar, no cream. I liked it bitter. It matched the quiet parts of me. I sat with my hands wrapped around the warm mug, pretending to scroll through the news on my phone, though the screen barely lit up. I wasn't there for the caffeine. I hadn't been for months. It was him. Always him. That boy behind the counter with the messy brown hair and forearms that flex whenever he reached for the milk steamer. The way his apron tied behind his back. The way he leaned forward just slightly to hand over a cup. It all had a rhythm, and it had become the metronome of my mornings. He was young, far too young, and beautiful in that careless way youth can be, unaware of how it stirs the air around them. I'd watch him from behind my sunglasses. Even inside, I wore them. He probably thought I was just another odd older woman hiding behind her routine. Maybe I was. But there was something about him that clung to me long after I left. The sound of his laugh, low and warm, the little crease that formed beside his eye when he smiled. I used to sit across from my husband at a kitchen table built for two, listening to spoons clink against cereal bowls and traffic hum outside. Now there was only silence. Except in this cafe. Except when I watched him. I don't know what made me do it that day. Maybe it was the way he tucked a stray curl behind his ear. Maybe it was the fact that he looked up and held my gaze for a second too long, just enough to send a small shock to somewhere deep under my skin. My heart did this stupid, adolescent thing, it fluttered. I hadn't felt that in years. I tore a piece from the corner of a napkin. My pen stuttered on the paper. It wasn't even a real message. Just a few shaky words that barely made sense once they were written. But they meant everything. You make my mornings brighter. That was it. Pathetic, wasn't it? But my hands were sweating as I folded it in half and slid it underneath the tip beside my empty cup. And then I ran. Not literally, but it felt like fleeing. I didn't look back at the counter, didn't wait to see if he'd notice. I pushed the door open with my shoulder and walked straight into the morning sun, heart pounding like it used to in my 20s when a boy would glance at me across a bar. I told myself I'd never go back. That it was foolish, desperate. That I'd ruined the one place that still felt like mine. But deep down, beneath the embarrassment and self-scolding, I hoped. Hoped he'd read it. Hoped he'd know it was from me. And God help me, I hope he'd feel something too. The next morning felt different the moment I stepped outside. The air had a stillness to it, like the world was holding its breath. I kept telling myself it was in my head, that I was projecting some fantasy onto the quiet street, but I felt it in my chest, the weight of something unsettled. When I reached the cafe, my hand paused on the door handle. I told myself I wouldn't scan the counter. That I'd go in, order my drink, and sit without expectation. But I looked, and he wasn't there. A different boy stood behind the espresso machine, shorter, broader, less graceful. He wore the same apron, the same forced smile, but none of the ease. None of the heat. I ordered without thinking, voice stiff, and took my seat at the window like always. It felt empty now. My table had lost its meaning. I left without finishing my coffee. The morning dragged behind me like a soap coat. I spent the afternoon pacing the rooms of my apartment, trying to convince myself I hadn't imagined it all, that there had been something in his glances, in the warmth behind his smile, in the way his fingers lingered near mine when he passed me the cup. But maybe it was only kindness. Maybe I was just another face in the cafe, nothing more. The second day, I returned out of habit more than hope. The same barista stood behind the counter. I didn't bother ordering. Just stared for a few seconds too long before turning away. As I passed the register, a girl with purple hair called after me. He left a note. Said to tell you, he got yours. I turned stunned. What did he say? She shrugged. Didn't say much. Just smiled. Said he hoped you'd come back. I left without a word, my breath caught somewhere between panic and a strange, fluttering anticipation. I should have felt relief. I should have smiled. But all I felt was exposed. I didn't go back the next morning. I told myself it was over. That I'd embarrassed myself enough, and I'd already pushed the limits of what a woman my age should dare to feel. I stayed in bed longer than usual, listening to the slow tick of the clock on my dresser. Each second seemed to echo louder than the last. By late afternoon, I needed air. I didn't intend to pass the cafe. I even took the long way around, looping through side streets, pretending I had errands. But my feet had a mind of their own. They carried me down that familiar stretch of sidewalk, past the flower stand with the wilting lilies, the newspaper box no one ever refilled. That's when I heard him. His voice, soft but unmistakable, cutting through the low murmur of the street. "Hey!" I turned and there he was, leaning casually against the brick wall beside the cafe's back door, hands in his pockets, as if he'd just been waiting. Like this was all natural. Like we were just two people who knew each other, who shared something real. His smile was quieter than usual, but no less warm. He pushed off the wall and stepped toward me, his gaze steady, but without pressure. I wanted to run. I wanted to wrap myself in the safety of silence. But I didn't move. "I've been hoping I'd see you," he said. "Do you want to hang out sometime? Just talk. Maybe tonight?" He wasn't trying to impress me. There was no clever line, no tension in his voice. Just a simple question hanging in the space between us. I should have hesitated, thought it through, counted the years between us. But I didn't. I nodded. Yes. I don't even remember if I smiled. But inside, something cracked open, something small and glowing and utterly wild. I went home with my stomach in knots, touched by the strange giddiness of being asked to dinner by someone young enough to be my son. I opened the drawer I hadn't touched in years and pulled out the lingerie I used to wear when my body still felt like mine. I wasn't expecting anything. Not really. But I wanted to feel again. And that, it turns out, was enough. I stood in front of the mirror longer than I should have, the strap of my bra twisted in my hand, the soft lace of the matching set whispering against my skin like a memory. It had been tucked away for years, buried under flannel and cotton and everything practical. The kind of fabric you wear when you're invisible to yourself. Tonight, though, I needed to remember. Or maybe I just needed to pretend. I slid the pieces on, the silk brushing over the soft places time had shaped, the stretch of my thighs, the curve of my waist. I didn't recognize myself at first. Then again, maybe I did. Maybe it was the woman I used to be, still hiding under all those quiet years. Over it, I threw a dress I hadn't worn in seasons. Black. Simple. The kind of dress that skimmed the body just enough to make you wonder what was beneath it. I didn't wear perfume too obvious, but I dabbed a little oil behind my ears, something warm and subtle like cedar and skin. My hands trembled when I clipped my earrings. I told myself again that it was just a casual night. A drink. A conversation. Nothing more. But deep down, I was aching for it to be more. He was already there when I arrived. Standing outside the little bar he'd suggested, leaned against the doorway like he didn't have a care in the world. His clothes were plain, dark jeans, a gray sweater that clung to the lines of his chest in a way that made it hard not to look. He smiled when he saw me, not wide, not showy, just a slow, knowing smile that said he was glad I came. We sat in a booth near the back, hidden from most of the bar's soft noise. He didn't waste time. There was no fumbling over small talk or polite questions. He told me with the same calm he used to ask for coffee orders what he liked. What he did in the quiet spaces of his life. What turned him on. He didn't look at me like I was fragile when he said it. He didn't ask if it made me uncomfortable. He just spoke. Plain clear. Restraint. Submission. Blindfolds. Control. Words that curled in the air between us like smoke. I listened, nodding once, maybe twice, pretending my throat hadn't gone dry. I should have felt nervous. I should have walked out. But instead I was leaning closer, fingers grazing the rim of my glass. I felt like I was watching myself from above, wondering who this woman was, this woman who smiled back at him and said, softly, "I've never tried that." His eyes darkened just slightly. The kind of shift you feel more than see. When he offered to take me home, I said yes. No ceremony. No drawn-out decision. Just yes. The walk to his apartment was quiet. He didn't touch me, didn't press his hand to the small of my back, didn't try to make it into something it wasn't. I was grateful for that. My heart was already knocking against my ribs like it had been locked up too long and finally saw a crack in the door. Inside, the space was simple, spare. Clean surfaces, low lighting, and a feeling that everything had its place, including me. He poured a drink. I said no. He nodded once and set it down. Then, without asking, without moving fast or slow, he walked over to me, brushed my hair back with his knuckles, and asked, very quietly, if I trusted him. I didn't answer. I simply closed my eyes. He didn't kiss me. He tied my hands. And something inside me came alive. The fabric slipped over my eyes like a secret. Soft, deliberate. It didn't shut out the light completely, just dulled it, turned the room into shadows and breath. My hands were already bound, neatly, gently, wrists wrapped in, secured behind me. I'd never been tied before. Never even imagined myself in such a position. But there I was, heart thudding like a drum in my throat, blind and waiting. It was the waiting that undid me. When you can't see, every sound becomes louder. Every breath carries weight. I heard the soft shift of his steps against the floor, the faint creak of the couch behind me as he moved, the warmth of his body somewhere nearby. I tried to steady my breath, but even that betrayed me, shallow, shaky, drawn in through parted lips that didn't know whether to speak or stay silent. He didn't rush. That's what made it so maddening. So perfect. He touched me first at the wrist, as if reminding me I was still tethered. His fingers skimmed over the skin slowly, tracing the path of the rope, like he was proud of the knots. Then up, along the inside of my arm, feather-light, until I shivered. I wasn't cold. I wasn't anything but a live wire. He never asked if I was okay. He didn't need to. My body was answering for me. I lost track of time. Everything became sensation. The way his breath landed near my ear but never quite touched it. The way his fingertips hovered just before contact, making the air itself feel like it was stroking me. I felt him circle me, the warmth of his presence brushing past, behind, in front, always moving, like a dance I didn't know the steps to. There was no talking, only breathing, only the sound of me coming undone without even being touched in any real way. When he finally did, when his hands met skin with intent, I nearly cried out. It wasn't pain. It wasn't even pleasure in the typical sense. It was more than that. It was the shock of being felt again. Not for what I used to be, not for what I was supposed to be, but for what I was right there, trembling, bound, still capable of wanting, still capable of being wanted. He explored me like I was new to the world, like I was something undiscovered. And I realized, somewhere between the brush of his fingers and the gasp I couldn't hold in, that I had buried parts of myself so deeply that I'd forgotten where they lived. He found them without even trying. And he didn't flinch. He didn't see a number. He didn't calculate the years on my skin. He didn't shrink back when I shook or stuttered or let slip some desperate sound I didn't recognize as my own. He held me. He guided me. He made room for everything I thought I had to hide. When he finally untied me, my arms fell to my sides like they no longer belonged to me. The blindfold came last. Light returned slowly. Shapes, then details. His face, soft with something I couldn't name, looking at me like I was a revelation. I didn't speak. Couldn't. I just laid there, eyes wide, lungs aching, heat still pulsing in the folds of my body. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel hollow. I didn't feel like a faded echo of a younger woman. I felt present, claimed, shattered and shining all at once. I didn't know what any of it meant. What would happen next? If this was a one-time thing or the beginning of something impossible. But as I curled against his chest, still bare and breathless, I knew only this. I was done pretending to be asleep. He laid it across the bed before he touched me. Not a flourish, not a threat. Just placed it there like a question. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Soft black leather, coiled neatly, thin and worn at the handle. It didn't look frightening. It looked personal, used, familiar. The kind of thing someone doesn't just own but understands. He didn't speak when I looked up at him. Just raised his brow slightly, giving me the choice. I reached for the hem of my dress instead. I wasn't afraid. Not in the way you're taught to be. I was nervous, yes. But it was a beautiful kind of nervous. Like the first second your feet leave the diving board and there's no going back. My body knew before my mind did. My pulse kicked up in my throat, and my breath caught at the edge of something I couldn't name. This time, he didn't blindfold me. He wanted my eyes open. Wanted me to see him, and to let him see me. He started with his hands. He always did. As if reminding me that I belonged here, that I hadn't wandered into something beyond my reach. He traced the line of my back, pausing at the base of my spine, where the curve deepened and my breath hitched. His fingers were reverent, slow but firm, possessive in a way that made me ache. Then I heard it. That first soft swish of air as he lifted it. Not a strike. Just a sound. A promise. I braced myself, but he didn't begin with force. The first touch of it barely kissed my skin. A whisper more than a lash. And yet the shock of it curled through me so fast I gasped without meaning to. My back arched, not from pain but from need. Again. A little harder this time. Across my thighs, then lower. My hips twitched before I could catch them. He didn't speak, but I felt his eyes watching, mapping every tremor, every gasp. He was reading me like Braille. Each stroke came with its own language. One stung, then soothed. One traced a line up the back of my leg that made me moan into the silence. The leather was cool at first, but soon it carried the warmth of my skin, and his hands followed behind it, grounding me. My body was reacting faster than my thoughts, pulsing, opening, shifting into something I didn't know it could be. He wasn't cruel. There was no meanness in it. This wasn't punishment. It was poetry. The marks he left weren't angry or accidental. They were deliberate, artful. Each one burned for a moment, then settled into heat, into pressure, into something that felt like claiming. I could feel myself slipping, not into fear, but into surrender. Into trust. Into this mad, beautiful thing I'd never let myself want until now. At some point, I whispered, please. I don't know what I was asking for. More? Less? Everything? My voice barely sounded like mine. And still he stayed tuned to me. When the rhythm shifted, when my body trembled just a second too long, he stopped. His hands came back to soothe, to stroke, to anchor. His mouth followed, brushing over the places he'd marked, like an apology or a prayer. By the end, I was shaking. Not from the pain, but from the release of it all. My skin hummed where he touched me, and my heart felt like it had broken open. Not shattered, just widened, stretched to fit all this newness, all this light. He held me afterward, my breath still uneven, my limbs boneless and sated. The room was warm. My chest pressed against his, and I let myself go limp, eyes fluttering closed, body still tingling. I didn't want to be treated delicately. I'd had enough of careful. I wanted the intensity, the realness, the raw, consuming power of it. I didn't want tenderness unless it came wrapped in fire. And in his hands, that's exactly what I got. He wheeled the mirror in front of the bed, smooth and silent, like it had been waiting in the corner for its cue. It was tall, framed in dark wood, and tilted just slightly downward, angled perfectly toward where I sat. Naked, raw, every nerve lit like a fuse. I turned my face away. Not out of modesty, not exactly. More out of habit. A lifetime of skipping mirrors, of changing in the dark, of folding myself small in dressing rooms had trained me well. I knew the parts that sagged. The softness I'd collected in places that once held tension. The way the skin had thinned across my collarbone, how my breasts no longer defied gravity but surrendered to it. Mirrors weren't something I welcomed. Not anymore. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Just stepped behind me, hands slipping over my shoulders, fingers grazing the rope still knotted at my wrists. I could feel his breath on my neck, steady, patient. His presence always landed like warmth. I want you to look, he whispered, but it wasn't a demand. It was an invitation. I kept my eyes closed, breathing through the rising discomfort. Not from him, never from him, but from the idea of seeing what he saw. He moved slowly, unbound my hands with care, but left the rope loose, draped around me like decoration, not restraint. He adjusted the angle of the mirror slightly, and I felt it even before I opened my eyes. Felt the weight of my reflection hanging there, waiting for me to face it. I opened them. It was jarring at first. Not just the sight, but the confrontation of it. My body spread across his sheets, thighs parted slightly, hair a mess of sweat and sleep, skin flushed from where his hands and the whip had left their echoes. I looked wrecked, but not ruined. There was a difference, and I saw it. The woman in the mirror didn't look desperate. She didn't look like someone clinging to youth or apologizing for time. She looked alive, wild even. Her mouth was parted, her breath shallow. Her cheeks were red. Her eyes, my eyes, looked back with a mix of disbelief and reverence. I didn't see sagging skin or years gone. I saw heat. I saw strength. And he was behind me in the frame, his body close, his hand resting just above my breast. He wasn't guiding me to look anymore. He was watching too, admiring. His gaze didn't drop or wander. It was fixed, proud, possessive. I touched the glass without thinking, fingers lifting to meet my own reflection. How long had it been since I saw myself without critique? How long had it been since anyone looked at me like I was wanted? And more than that, how long since I believed I deserved to be? The tears came quietly. Not a flood, just a few, warm and disorienting. I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall, soft trails down my cheeks. I wasn't crying from sadness. It was something else. Something closer to grief, but also relief. Like mourning all the years I'd spent hiding and finally stepping back into the light. He didn't move. He stayed behind me, his hands on my hips, his chin resting near my shoulder. I could feel his pride. Not just in what he'd done to me, but in what he'd shown me. Who he'd helped me uncover. I stood up slowly, never breaking eye contact with that woman in the mirror. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull a robe around me. I just stood there, letting the air kiss my skin, watching myself with new eyes. I thought I was past the age of becoming anything new. Turns out, I'd only just arrived. The cuffs felt different in my hands. He placed them in my palm without ceremony. No explanation, no instructions, just metal and silence and the weight of trust. I held them like something sacred, heavy with meaning. The leather still warm from his skin. My fingers curled around the buckle and I realized I was trembling, not from fear, but from the rawness of what he was giving me. He stood in front of me, unguarded, his arms loose at his sides, his eyes steady and open. No bravado. No pretense. Just quiet submission. I could feel my breath thicken as I stepped closer, the air stretching between us like silk. I didn't ask if he was sure. He'd already told me in the way he offered the tools. I fastened one cuff, then the other, guiding his wrists behind his back. The sound of the leather tightening sent a thrill up my spine. I half expected my hands to hesitate, to fumble, but they didn't. They knew what they were doing. Somewhere beneath the years of softness and compliance, I'd always carried this part of myself. This pulse, this edge. It had just never had room to rise. Now it was rising. I circled him slowly, letting my fingers graze his skin with nothing more than breath. I watched how he reacted, the way his shoulders shifted under my touch, how the muscles in his stomach twitched when my nails skimmed too lightly. He was at my mercy, and I was intoxicated by it. The whip lay on the bed, coiled like a sleeping snake. I let it stay there for a while. I didn't need it yet. I wanted to feel him first. Explore him. I pressed him down onto the mattress, face first, the rope still biting into his wrists. He didn't resist. He exhaled, deep and slow, like surrendering was the most natural thing in the world. And I realized then that what I'd always associated with power, force, control, pressure wasn't quite right. Power was this: holding someone's vulnerability in your hands and choosing not to break it. I kissed the back of his neck. I bit his shoulder. I dragged my teeth across his spine just to feel him shudder. I ran my fingers down his thighs, slow and torturous, until his breath turned to pleading. And when I finally reached for the whip, he didn't flinch. I struck once, softly, across the backs of his legs, just to see how it sounded in the room. It was quieter than I thought. More like a whisper than a crack. But he gasped. A beautiful involuntary sound. I did it again. A little harder. And again. Watching the red rise in thin, delicate lines like heat blooming across pale skin. He squirmed. Not away from me, but toward me. Toward what I was doing. Toward whatever I would do next. And God, how that lit something in me. This man, strong, capable, a storm when he wanted to be, was unraveling beneath me. Not from pain, but from permission. I touched him everywhere, murmuring nothing but breath and heat and hunger. He whimpered my name once. Not like a plea, like an offering. I took it and gave back more. When I finally pulled the blindfold over his eyes, his lips parted like a man about to be kissed. But I didn't kiss him. Not yet. I watched him instead, watched the tension, the patience, the fire he was trying so hard to keep under control. I leaned close to his ear and whispered that he was mine, just for this moment. And he nodded. That nod unraveled something in me. Something feral. Something free. I didn't just want to lead. I wanted to own him, the way he had owned me, with care, with intensity, with a reverence that was all-consuming. I saw every part of him that night. The strong, the silent, the desperate, the undone. And somewhere between the leather and the whisper, the sting and the hush, I realized something I never expected. I didn't just like the power. I needed it. I lost count of how many times I begged. It wasn't even words, not really, just the breath of them, soft and trembling, tumbling from my lips without meaning to. My hands were tied again, but this time not behind me. Above. Stretched and fastened to the frame of his headboard, rope pulling my arms taut while the rest of me unraveled. I could feel the sheen of sweat along my stomach, the dampness between my thighs, the flush that had spread across my chest like fire licking up dry wood. He hadn't given me what I wanted. Not yet. That was the game. He moved like time didn't matter. Every glance, every pause was deliberate. He'd bring me close, so close, and then stop. A hand pulled away. A mouth retreating just before the moment shattered. I'd rise, cresting that unbearable peak, only to be dropped gently back into ache. Again, and again, and again. There was no time in that room. Only sensation. Only the sharp edge of needing and the soft cradle of being needed. He whispered things, but they weren't instructions. They were reminders. That I was his. That my pleasure wasn't something I had to ask for anymore. It was something I deserved, but only when he allowed it. That contradiction made me burn. The idea that surrender could be power. That I could float on the edge of release, held there by nothing but his voice in his hands, and still feel in control. Or maybe beyond it. Maybe something freer. My body turned on itself. Muscles trembling. Breath skipping. I didn't care if I looked wild, undone, desperate. I didn't care if I cried or moaned or screamed his name so many times it stopped sounding like a word. I had stopped performing. There was nothing left to pretend. At one point, I bit my own lip so hard I tasted copper. But I didn't stop. I wanted the ache. Wanted to feel something other than silence and aging and the endless muting of myself. He made me feel everything. When he finally touched me the way I needed, no teasing, no pulling back, I shattered. Not all at once. Not like in the stories. It came in waves. One after the other. My thighs clenching, my eyes rolling back, my whole body convulsing with the pleasure I hadn't thought was still possible. I didn't just climax. I came undone. He held me through it, his hand over my ribs, feeling every quiver. His mouth brushed my shoulder, and I let the tears come this time. Not quietly. Not prettily. I sobbed against his chest. Legs shaking, arms limp in their binds, every inch of me soaked in sweat, in want and disbelief. This wasn't just about lust. Not anymore. It was a rebirth. I had spent so long living in a body I treated like a burden. A thing to cover. To fix. To critique. But in his hands it became something worshipped. Something sacred. He touched my hips like they were altars. He whispered into the hollow of my throat like it was confession. He kissed the curve of my belly as if it told stories no one else had ever listened to. And every time he touched me again I changed. The woman who lay there afterward, tangled in sheets, skin marked by pleasure, soul trembling with joy, she was new. And I loved her. Not because she was perfect, but because she was mine. The pearls felt heavy around my neck, their weight more intimate than any fabric could have been. They sat against my collarbone like fingertips, cold at first, then slowly warming to my skin. I had chosen them on a whim, not for seduction but for nostalgia. A quiet nod to a version of myself that once believed pearls were the finishing touch to a perfect evening. Tonight they were the only thing I wore. He had booked the hotel, a place neither of us belonged. Too modern, too clean, too anonymous. No photos on the walls, no story in the air. Just blankness, waiting to be filled. I liked it that way. No history here, no memory. Just now. I stood by the window when he came up behind me. The curtains were pulled back, and below us, the city flickered in yellow and red, like it was trying to outshine the stars. His hands wrapped around my waist, fingers slipping low, grounding me. I leaned into him, head tilting slightly, waiting for what would come next. But he didn't touch me like he usually did. Not right away. Instead, he spoke. His voice was low even, but not the voice he used when coaxing me, commanding me. This was different. He said he wanted to tell me something. A fantasy, he called it. I listened, curious. He described a woman, a little older, married, quiet, overlooked. Her husband always traveling, always distracted. She meets someone. A boy. Much younger. They begin to play a game, one that starts in stolen glances and ends in silk rope and bruised thighs. Nothing in his voice hinted at malice. If anything, there was reverence in the way he told it. But my breath started to shallow anyway. He kept going. He said the woman wore pearls once. That the boy undressed her slowly, carefully, leaving only those beads draped against her bare chest. That he kissed each one. Counted them with his tongue. That he whispered something into her skin, words no one else would understand. And then he said it. That phrase. That stupid, intimate phrase. 4 words my husband used to murmur into my neck, always when he thought I was falling asleep. Words I never repeated to anyone. A secret nickname wrapped in a private joke from the first year of our marriage. He said them like they belonged to him. My body froze. I turned slowly, not even aware of the way my knees had started to tremble. My eyes searched his, and for the first time since I met him, I saw something there I didn't recognize. Not mischief. Not lust. Not even control. Regret. He looked at me so calm, so still, and said he knew who I was. And he knew who he was. The silence that followed was thick enough to drown in. I couldn't speak. Couldn't even form the right question. The only thing I could do was stare at this man, this boy, who had taken my body, shaken my soul, and now held a truth in his mouth that I hadn't even known existed. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Everything tilted. The hotel room, the city lights, the very floor beneath me. I pressed a hand to my chest as if trying to keep my heart from falling out. I asked him how. He said nothing. Just looked at me like he was sorry. Like he wasn't. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But most of all, I wanted to rewind everything. Take it all back. Every note. Every whisper. Every yes. But I couldn't. Because I had wanted it. Still did. Even as the world cracked open around me. And that made it so much worse. I sat on the edge of the bed, the pearls still clinging to my skin, though I suddenly felt naked in a way I hadn't before. Not from the lack of clothing. From the truth. The sick, strange truth that had just slipped out between us and hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Impossible to ignore, impossible to breathe around. He didn't try to touch me again. He just stood there, watching me with a calm that made me furious. My fists clenched against the crisp sheets, and I stared at the floor, trying to rearrange everything I thought I knew into some shape I could live with. A son. My husband's son. Not a theory. Not a cruel joke. A secret buried and breathing in front of me. And I had kissed him, touched him, let him see parts of me that had never been shown in full light. I'd whispered things into his mouth that I'd never said to my husband. I had wanted him in every way a woman could want a man, and now? Now what? The walls seemed to hum. My heart, still raw from the night before, thudded in my chest like it was trying to escape. He spoke again, but softer now. Not pleading. Not justifying. Just words. He told me he'd known for a while. That he'd found out about the marriage. That his mother had let it slip, her bitterness finally cracking after years of silence. That he had looked me up. Seen me. And then one day see me again in the cafe across the room, drinking black coffee with tired eyes and lips that never smiled all the way. He said he hadn't planned any of it. That something shifted when he watched me look at him, not with suspicion or distance, but with longing. That he'd been pulled into it. Into me. That it had never been about revenge. That it had been about recognition. That shook me more than the rest. Because the truth was I had recognized something in him too. Not his father's eyes or jaw or voice, but something that went deeper. Something buried and aching just like me. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady, and crossed to the mirror. The same one that had once shown me a woman I could love. I looked again now, half expecting her to be gone. But there she was. Wrecked, yes. Red-eyed, bruised from the inside out. But still there. Still me. Behind me, he didn't move. I wanted to scream at him. Slap him. Collapse into his arms. I wanted all of it, which made everything worse. I had come here chasing something I didn't have a name for, and now it had a face that shared blood with the man I had built my life beside. What did that make me? I turned toward him slowly. My voice came out hoarse, rough around the edges. I told him to leave. Not with anger. Just necessity. He didn't argue. He gathered his things in silence. No apology. No tears. At the door he paused. Said only one thing. You woke me up. And then he left. I sat there for a long time after, the room growing cold. The pearls still on my skin. My hands in my lap like I didn't know what to do with them anymore. The guilt would come. The shame. I knew that. It would crawl into bed with me and nest under my ribs. But right then, in the quiet aftermath, all I could feel was this deep, burning ache of being alive again. Not happy, not proud, but alive. And I would take it, even if it meant carrying the burn. Like this video and subscribe to Nasty Talks. Don't forget to send this video to your friends on WhatsApp, so they can enjoy it too. Thanks for being here with me.